Hello sailors and welcome back to your next Sail Smart video. My name's Jake and this time we're talking about how to read a weather forecast. Obviously it goes without saying that reading a weather forecast is the bread and butter of any sailing session that goes afloat. We have to know what the weather's going to do, otherwise unfortunately we could find ourselves in a bit of a sticky situation. Always try and look at more than one forecast. As a magic rule, try 3, but there's nothing wrong with looking at 4 or 5 forecasts if you're struggling to work out exactly what the weather's going to do whilst you're on the water. Now, there is no substitution for local knowledge, and whilst you're sailing at an RYA recognised training centre or a club, there will be instructors there that will know the local characteristics, maybe the weather forecasts that they use that are most accurate to help you have a nice time on the water. There are a plethora of weather forecasts out there that you can go and look at. I think ones that I've come across that are most popular are things like XC Weather, Wind Guru, Wind Finder, windy.com, and even just the BBC. However, there is one weather forecast that I think pips them to the post and is the most reliable and is used most widely by all RYA instructors, and that is the Met Office Inshore Forecast. Now this is a specific marine forecast, and that means it takes into account a few extra things that land forecasts might not. And it's also not for the land, it's for the water. Now a inshore waters forecast works like this. It's on the Met Office website and it's easily accessible by your phone or by a computer. Once you get onto the right web page, you will need to know when you're going sailing and where you're going sailing. There is no point looking at a weather forecast for tomorrow when you're going sailing in 4 days' time. With location, the inshore's forecast is split up into regions. If you go onto the website, you'll be able to see that the entire coastline of the UK is split up into areas, and you just need to click on the area where you're going sailing and the weather forecast will pop up. Obviously, you'll be able to see that the area is actually quite large. And a fun fact is that it's actually measured up to 12 nautical miles offshore. So the weather forecast can be for quite a large area when we're only sailing in a very, very small portion of that. So just remember that when we're reading our weather forecast, if it says something and it's in the east of that region and we're sailing in the west of that region, it might not necessarily apply to us. When you read the forecast, you'll see that at the top there is a general situation, which sounds very exciting, and will give you the general idea of what's going on. This will be whether there's a weather front moving through, whether there's clear skies, just generally, if you could sum it up, that's what will be in the general situation. And I would encourage you to read that because it will set your mind on the right path to reading the weather forecast. Following that, you'll see that there are 4 sections. Those sections are wind, sea state, visibility, and weather. In the wind section, it's going to use numbers to describe the strength of wind, and these numbers represent the Beaufort wind scale. So if you're not sure what that is, either stay tuned for a later video or take a look on the internet. One of the words you'll find is variable. Now this normally comes up when we've got some light wind days, and with light winds the wind can be affected a little bit more often, and the wind will change direction more frequently than it should. Because we don't know the exact direction, they'll call it variable. And on these days, you might find that a local feature, like a sea breeze, is going to be a little bit more dominant. The other words are backing and veering. Now then, these are to do with the wind changing direction and the way that it's going to do that. So if the wind is going to veer, it's going to change direction, but it's going to do it in a clockwise manner. So if you were to imagine looking at the area you're going sailing in, perhaps on a map, and if it's going to go clockwise, well, that's going to be veering. You've got it. If it's backing, the wind is changing direction anti-clockwise. Now then, sea state. Now, sea state is basically the waves, the height of the waves. How big are they? And some of these numbers might sound quite daunting to you if you sail inshore or in a harbour like I learned to sail for many years as a youngster. Seeing a wave that was more than maybe a couple of feet high and things were pretty windy. So, Remember that these sea states are for up to 12 miles offshore, and they can be much, much bigger with a much smaller wind strength. So don't panic too much if you hear these words, but this is what the words actually mean. So we've got smooth, which is up to half a metre high, slight, which is half a metre to 1.5, moderate is 1.5 to 2.5, and it does go on beyond that, but I think those sea states are going to be well beyond the wind strength that we're going to want to be sailing in our sailing dinghies. So, moving on, we've got the weather. Now this is really, really simple, especially for a cloud expert like yourself. Fair is the only tricky word in here. The other words are going to be rain, snow, hail, that sort of thing, and I'm sure you know what those are. Fair is a little bit ambiguous. We're not really sure what that means. In this forecast, it means that really it's not changing. It might be sunny, it might be cloudy, but there's nothing to worry about. There's no distinguishing features of the weather. Finally, we've got visibility. Now, first and foremost, I would always encourage you to sail where you can visibly see where you've come from. Now, that might be round the corner, I understand, but make sure that you can always see the land from whence you came. So with visibility, it's going to say probably good, moderate, or poor. Now, good means that we've got up to 5 nautical miles of visibility, and that's a lot. Moderate is 2 to 5 miles visibility, and poor is going to be less than 2 miles. So if we look at an actual weather forecast now, hopefully it will make a bit more sense. So the wind here is northerly or northeasterly 2 to 4. When it says northeasterly, that means it's coming from that direction rather than moving towards that direction. So northeasterly is coming from the northeast, moving to the southwest. 2 to 4, and those numbers are the Beaufort wind scale. 2 to 4, that's going to be medium to medium strong wind potentially. Sea state, slight. Now we know that that means that there could be a tiny little wave. Becoming smooth or slight means that it's going to get a little bit less, a little bit flatter on the waves. The weather, fog patches later in the north. Now in the north doesn't mean in Scotland, it means in the north of this particular area, which actually was around London. So it's going to be slightly north in that area. Visibility, moderate or good. Now remember that refers to a specific amount of miles, occasionally very poor later in the north. And again, you can match that up with the fog to realise that that's what it's talking about. Below that, you can see an outlook for the following 24 hours. And you've guessed it, if you find when this forecast was written, that one is for the following 24 hours. Something else that can help us with working out what the weather is doing is looking at a weather station. Now this won't give us a weather forecast, but it can help us out. So for example, if you sail near Weymouth, there are 2 of these on the breakwater, and if you sail in Chichester Harbour, there's one inside and outside the harbour, and there's many, many others around the country. Now these will show you what the weather is doing and what the weather has done. Not what the weather is going to do. But we can add this in to help us work out what the weather is going to do. The reason for this is we can look at basic trends in the weather forecast. So if we look at some of the other weather forecasts here, we can notice basic trends. For example, here you can see when the wind changes direction to a southeasterly, the wind is going to build, and we can watch that. See when the wind changes direction, and at that point we know that we need to reef, we need to go ashore, or now we're going to start playing and have some fun. Now don't forget, when you're planning your trip and you've got your weather forecast and you think you know what you're going to do, don't forget to add in the tide if you're sailing on a coastal location, because the tide can have a slight effect on the weather as well, mainly to do with the sea state. If the wind and the tide are going in opposite directions and you call that wind over tide, that can make it a little bit more choppy. If the wind and the tide are going in the same direction, normally that will flatten things out a bit. So don't forget, there's no substitute for local knowledge. Ask your instructor or someone at your club and have a great time when you're sailing.
That was a great introduction on weather. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Royal Yachting Association. If we just look at the City Sailing website, I want to go through some of our favourite weather websites and some great websites to look at we find useful before we go sailing. We've popped all our websites. If you go to Tilly Sailing Home, drop down links, we've popped all our links that we like on our website, and that includes some of the weather websites. So if we go through them, do the pros and cons. If you have Navionics, and we have a tutorial on Navionics, you can click on the side and you can put the weather on here on this free Navionics web app. It doesn't have that facility. If we look at XC weather here, I like it because we can just drag our arrow over anywhere in the country and it will give us weather forecasts. Also, for handy when I'm in Scotland, I can have a look at, see what's happening here in, say, Tyree, Outer Hebrides. So generally, if the wind's coming from the west or southwest, whatever's happening out here is going to come in. So this gives me the whole country. So if we look at London, today we've got a southwesterly, 15 to 20 miles an hour. We can change that to knots if we wish. If we click on it, it will give us the week. One slight word of warning here on this one is that if you click on it for the week, it only gives you the base level of the wind. If you click it in short term, it will give you the ambient wind and the gusting wind. So today, southwesterly, 14 to 30 knots blowing. It will give you the speed at the moment, the direction at the moment, the temperature at the moment, the dew point, humidity, air pressure, visibility, cloud, and also, quite importantly, the wind history. So I like XC Weather. It's a great app on the phone as well. You just click on the area and it will download it. With the app on the phone, it will just give you the information like this, and it doesn't use much data to download, so we like that. The other one I like is Wind Guru. Two reasons. One, it downloads quickly, so if you're in an area that's in and out of phone range or internet range, just need a little bit of data and you'll get this information, and it gives you the day at the top, the time, the hour, the wind speed, which is the ambient wind speed, and the gust speed, the direction, the temperature, and the cloud cover, and that will be high, mid and low precipitation in millimeters. So it will give you a trend of what's going on. So obviously today windy, this weekend windy, then going quieter next week, and you can scroll along and it will give you for a week or so. If you subscribe to it, obviously you'll get hourly information and you'll get more detail and a longer forecast. Final one we like is Windy, very powerful weather forecasting and app and modelling. We can scroll to anywhere in the world. Just looking earlier, interesting, off Cape Horn, it's got an easterly, which is quite unusual. But if we go a little bit closer to home and we can zoom in to the UK, just double click and we can zoom in and it'll bring us in to our area, and we can go quite close. On the right hand here, we're on wind, so it gives us wind speed. We can go to radar and satellites and it will give you weather radar of what's going on, where the rain is. We can click on the one that says rain and thunder and it will give predicted where the rain is. We can do temperature, we can do clouds, we can do waves. Now wave and swell is interesting for if we're choosing an anchorage and it's been blowing one direction for a while, whether the swell is still there coming in. Also interesting for surfers as well. So we've got the waves there, we've got the swell, or the swell's doing there. Loads of other information. We can go, if I go back to the wind, we can work out what's happening on the surface and we can go up and down different altitudes on it. On the bottom bar, we can either play, which is here, and it will play along Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or we can just simply click on or scroll ourselves of what's happening and what's changing. So that's what's happening at the moment. We can go to, if we want to know what's happening, say in London, we can click on London and it will give us the forecast underneath. Again, it will give us the scroll bar there. If we want to know what's happening from other models, we can click on the button at the bottom that says compare models, and if you scroll to the right, it tells you the different agency models. So the American one, Meteo Blue, Meteo France, and it tells you where they're more accurate for and where they're best for. So if we look at the models here, say for today, it's giving us wind 12 to 14, 16, 17, 14, 11 to 12, 14. So we know if they're all consistent, that's probably what you're going to get. Like tonight, they're all giving rain. Pretty sure we'll get rain. Sometimes if the models don't all agree, it could be that the weather's changing. So be a little bit more careful when you go out sailing, because it may not do what one forecast says. But this is great to compare the different modelling features with each other. And also you can work out the different modelling and the different models of where the weather comes from, so you're not relying on one source. So windy, love windy, loads of great features. But what I suggest you do is choose the forecast that you like and have a look at that, but also look at least 3 weather forecasts, 3 different websites, and when you do go to windy, have a look at the different models and see if they match up. So have fun, look at the weather. I suggest you look at a weather forecast and then look out the window to see whether the rain, the fronts, and what it's saying on the forecast is actually happening as it goes through where you are. So never forget to look at the sky and actually see what's happening where you are. It's an important indication. Okie doke, have fun, and see you later. Bye.